Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Panasonic Lumix DMC-LX3. Here it is, the LX3. This is the successor to the Lumix LX2, which makes it Panasonic's high-end compact for enthusiast photographers. The LX3 is designed for people who want a compact camera but don't want to compromise on things like manual control. It's also ideal for anyone who owns a DSLR but wants a high-end compact to complement it for times when they want a more pocketable camera. Now the LX3 is absolutely packed with features, so without further ado, let's take a look at some of its highlights. With 10.1 megapixels, the LX3 has essentially the same resolution as its predecessor, but the sensors are different shape. The earlier LX2 sensor was a 16:9 shape, whereas the new LX3 has a more conventional 4:3 shape sensor. Now Panasonic employs a cunning trick which we've seen before on the Lumix TZ5, where it can actually maintain the angle of view when you switch to different aspect ratios, and that's illustrated by this screen grab that you can see here. So when you switch to those widescreen aspects, you don't actually just crop the top and the bottom, you actually do capture more widthways. Next up, the lens. And like all of Panasonic's compacts, the LX3 features optical image stabilization to help counteract for camera shake. Now the optical zoom range on the LX3 is 2.5 times, which may be shorter than the 4 times of its predecessor, but it does feature two very important differences. First of all, the maximum coverage when zoomed out is equivalent to 24mm. That's much wider than the 28mm of the LX2 and much wider than the 35mm equivalent that you find on most compacts these days. Also, importantly, the LX3's lens has a very bright focal ratio of f2.0 when it's zoomed out. This allows the lens to gather twice as much light as an equivalent lens at f2.8, and that's obviously very useful when you're shooting in low light conditions. It's just a shame that there's no built-in sliding lens cover on the LX3. Instead, you'll need to make do with a lens cap. Around the back of the camera you'll find a 3-inch screen with 460k pixel resolution. That's both larger and more detailed than the screen on the LX2. Notice, however, that the LX2 had a slightly wider 16:9 shaped screen to match its sensor, whereas the LX3 screen is not quite as wide. Although interestingly, the screen is still wider than the actual sensor shape. It's a 3:2 screen, whereas the sensor is a slightly squarer 4:3 shape. Like its predecessor, the LX3 features a RAW recording option. This is a very important feature for enthusiasts as it allows the camera to record the raw data from the sensor, which gives you the maximum possible quality while also giving you plenty of opportunities to tweak the image in software later. The LX3 also features high-definition movie recording in the 720p format, and you're watching an example of that right now. I'm stood about 2 feet away from the LX3, which is recording this segment, although you're watching it in standard definition. Here's some more footage taken with the LX3's high-definition movie mode. Now unfortunately, once you start filming with the LX3 you can't adjust that optical zoom, and that is a bit of a downside. If you look closely you'll also notice that there's some noise in the background. The images are certainly not as clean as those from a dedicated camcorder. However, they are cleaner than those from earlier Panasonic compacts, which also featured HD recording facilities. Now let's take a closer look at the LX3's controls. The LX3's controls greatly resemble those of the earlier LX2, although you'll notice one thing here that was missing on its predecessor, a flash hot shoe. This allows you to mount an external flash gun and obviously deliver much more power than the built-in model, which pops up here. You'll also notice, like the LX2 before it, you can adjust the aspect ratio with this switch on top of the lens. Here we are at 4:3, the slightly wider 3:2, and then the wider 16:9. You can also adjust the LX3's focusing mode on the side here, and there is full manual focusing with this camera. Going back to the controls again, you'll see the main mode dial here offering program, aperture, shutter priority and full manual control. However, if you just want an easier life, you can put the LX3 on Panasonic's excellent intelligent auto mode. This has an uncanny ability of working out what kind of picture you're trying to take. If you're in manual focus mode, you can press this button here to temporarily autofocus. Below this you'll find the power switch and also the shutter release with a zoom rocker around it. Around the back of the camera it resembles most of Panasonic's recent models. You have a switch here that puts the camera between record and play mode, a tiny joystick here which is used to adjust various settings, and also the drop down Q menu I'll show you in a moment, and the usual 4 cross keys here. You'll notice that this bottom button is now a programmable function key. Turning to the bottom of the camera, you'll find the rechargeable battery and memory card. And of course, being a Panasonic model, the LX3 takes SD. Finally, in the compartment to the side of the camera, you'll find the ports. At the top, a component output for use with the optional component cable that can do high definition slideshows. Below that, a combined TV and USB output, and below that, a DC input. We're outside with the Lumix LX3, so switch it on, and about 2 seconds later you're ready for action. Now I'm using the full size of this 3:2 aspect ratio screen, but you can change the aspect ratio using a switch on top of the lens. If I switch it to 4:3 and turn it round, you can see here black bars running down the left and right side of the image. Now if I switch that back to 3:2, you'll see the image filling the screen, and if I switch it to 16:9, you'll now see black bars at the top and bottom. So for this demonstration, I'm going to leave it at 3:2 and fill the screen. Now let's check out the optical zoom range of this camera. Here we are zoomed out at an equivalent of 24mm, and now zoomed in to its maximum telephoto end of 60mm. Now that's not a massive range, but it did start off much wider than most compacts. Now if I press the display button here, you can overlay things like an alignment grid. Press it once more, you get detailed shooting information. And you'll also notice here a live histogram, which I've enabled in the menus. Now like other Panasonic compacts, the LX3 makes it very easy to adjust settings. If I just push this joystick here, I can fire up a drop-down menu. And by bringing it along, you can adjust things like the white balance, or perhaps the sensitivity, or maybe the resolution. It's a really quick and easy way to change options. You can also use this joystick to adjust things like the aperture and shutter speed. If I put the camera to aperture priority, you'll see the aperture value there, the F number highlighted yellow. This means I can use the joystick, pushing it up and down to change that F number. You'll also notice an arrow pointing left. If I push the joystick left, it now means I can adjust the exposure compensation, making it brighter or perhaps a bit darker. Likewise, if I put the camera into fully manual mode, you'll see that the shutter speed is now highlighted yellow, so I can adjust that by pushing the joystick up and down. Or if I push it left, you'll see the F number highlighted, so I can now adjust the aperture. Now you can also put the LX3 into manual focus mode using this switch on the side of the lens. And now you can use the joystick to actually adjust the focusing distance. You can see that bar moving up and down here on the right hand side. And you can also see a magnified area in the middle, which helps you confirm that focus. So if I now just adjust that up towards the infinity direction, you'll see that become much sharper. The Panasonic Lumix LX3 is an ideal compact for enthusiasts, and indeed ticks most of the boxes these types of photographers look for when shopping for a new camera. The LX3 features wider than average coverage that's equivalent to 24mm, and also a brighter focal ratio than normal of f2.0. The LX3 additionally features full manual control, aperture and shutter priority, along with one of the best automatic modes on the market. On top of that, you also get a flash hot shoe, the option to record your images in the RAW format, and also high definition movies. This is one feature packed camera, and you get all of that also in a package that's relatively small and light. The only real physical downsides to this camera are the fact that you have to use a lens cap, which can slow you down when you're trying to start the camera up, and also its focal range. It's only 2.5 times, which means its maximum telephoto is an equivalent of 60mm. So that's a lot shorter than you'll get with some rival models, and you have to work out whether that range will suit your style of photography. The other aspect that you'll want to look into is the actual image quality. Now, its predecessor, the LX2, had some issues with noise, and Panasonic's making some big claims about the capabilities of the LX3. So to find out how this camera performs in that respect, head on over to cameralabs.com. There you'll see results taken at all sensitivities using the LX3 directly compared against the Canon PowerShot G9, which will undoubtedly be one of this camera's biggest rivals. And we've also thrown in some results from a digital SLR to show you the difference between an enthusiast compact and what you get with a camera with a much larger sensor. So to find out if the Lumix LX3 is the ideal compact camera for enthusiasts, head on over to our full review. You'll find it at www.cameralabs.com.